Well, good morning and welcome to the trade setup right here on BloombergQuint Live. I'm Niraj Shah, and it promises to be an interesting day of trade from multiple factors point of view. Some specific sectors which would be in focus, some very interesting developments that have happened on the stock front as well, and some global developments which are very, very interesting. If you need a global investor, then it's been, well, a very, very amazing last 24 hours on various counts, and we'll talk about that. First, let's get up to date about what's happening in the world market. So the US markets will come up on your screen, and for the Nasdaq, it was a terrific day. Tops 13,000 for the top 13,000 for the first time. So 13,067, big day for the Nasdaq. So everybody was worried about the tech stocks and what Joe Biden's potential tax increases would do. So everybody's now pricing in, and that will happen, and we'll talk about that. And it could well happen, but yesterday the markets didn't show any signs of that. So the Nasdaq did well. Not that the Dow and the S&P didn't do well, just that the Nasdaq really shone through in trade yesterday and did extremely well. So 13,067 for that one in the session. Now, there is this very interesting chart on the Bloomberg terminal which speaks about the divergence between the volatility of the indices and Nasdaq in particular versus the prices. And does that give us any indication of what could come again? I mean, and the levels and the divergence is completely different. But look at this chart. So the Nasdaq 100 and the VIX divergence and how that has played out in the past. So just that the way it's cooled off, the volatility of the VIX versus the Nasdaq index, and look at that yawning gap. It's pretty interesting. Let's wait and watch if this means that there is more upsides to the Nasdaq all over again, despite the tax bit, or because of this divergence and at points of time when it cools off, could there be a bit of volatility increase and a cool off in the Nasdaq itself? I think time will tell. By the way, just before we move on to Asia, I just want to mention, I saw this news just right now. There is some talk of a deal, even though it's pending approval, between Apple and Hyundai Motors for electric vehicles. So as much as Apple is in focus, Hyundai Motors in Korea, and which is the KOSPI, is up 18%. Maybe we finally have competition to Tesla coming up, because it's Apple and none other which is doing this. And Hyundai has been a pretty competent car manufacturer for sure. Speaking of KOSPI, by the way, that index is actually doing well. So Asia's mixed bag. KOSPI is doing really well for itself. HSI too, about 0.75% in the green. The SGX Nifty doesn't have as much luck. The last time that I saw 5 minutes ago, the SGX Nifty was up just about 0.7, 0.8%. Okay, now it's maybe slightly more. But yeah, in and around those levels. On the sgxnifty.org, which is a 15-minute lag, it was up about 0.7, 0.8%, or rather 0.17, 0.18%, so about 0.2%. But yeah, in and around this 0.5% to 0.25% kind of a range is where the SGX Nifty would open, and that should be fine. I mean, if you're not a index trader, then I think it should be okay for most. So, what is it that the trade setup seems to be suggesting today? Well, keep in mind, I think one the GDP data came out. Let me just very quickly enumerate that. So the advanced estimates of GDP indicate that the real GDP might contract about 7.7%. Nominal GDP is estimated to fall about 4.2%. Now, viewers, a bit of a plug here, but let me tell you, if you guys want to understand why the nominal GDP might be a really good factor to look at versus real GDP, there is a very good chat that we did with Jeetu Punjabi of EM Capital Advisors. So from an equity watcher's perspective, why is the nominal GDP a really good indication? Do try and log into our website and search for EM Capital Advisors or Jeetu Punjabi, and then try and hear that 30-minute interview. It gives you a good idea of how you should look at these inflation numbers, GDP numbers, and then try and figure out your strategy for investing in the equity markets. So I do try and see that. But anyways, this is what we've estimated. And a lot of people believe, I mean, let me just quickly go into the trade setup, because I think that from a trade setup perspective today or for the near term, the fact that we are contracting, whether it's 7.7%, 8%, 7.5%, I don't think it matters, because I think the markets is already looking ahead of the FY21 GDP data. We are already looking at FY22 or rather FY20 GDP data. We are already looking ahead because we are already looking at the April to June quarter or July to September quarter for FY22 and thinking of the base effect and what it will do to growth numbers. So, I mean, really, I don't think it has too much of an impact in the markets. I think, to my mind, the only potential threat for world equity markets for now seems to be the higher taxation from the Joe Biden government. That probability remains the only overhang for the next 6 months. I mean, of course, markets correct when it's least expected and for news which is very unknown. But right now, in terms of known news, if indeed there is a hike in taxes, and which also is a 50-50 probability, then that remains an overhang. For our markets, the Bank Nifty performance in the absence of a stronger Reliance Industries remains the key trigger. We've had Reliance being a dog of a stock for the last 3 to 4 odd months, and if Reliance is not participating, unless the Bank Nifty participates, it's very difficult to make a case for substantial upside. So watch out for the Nifty Bank. If it eclipses its recent highs or all-time highs and then moves ahead, then that might be the trigger for the markets. Just lastly, before I get to stocks, and maybe some stocks would be in focus because of this as well. There's this chart again on the terminal, which is a gauge of industrial metals and which shows prices nearing 7-year highs. Now, in the past, look at it, 2 instances wherein from these levels the prices have contracted. Could that happen again is the question that I'm leaving you with. I do not have an answer to this. Most people believe that prices will stay firm. Economy picking up would mean that this would go up and will not contract from here. But keep in mind, this has happened twice in the last 7 years, that you hit these levels and come off. And I think I read a note which said that maybe, just maybe, after this breakneck run, could metal prices be sideways? Commodity prices turn sideways. They may not fall too much, but can they turn sideways? You've got to try and read about this a bit more. Yesterday, though, the Credit Suisse note which came out said that steel prices will remain firm, and that should only augur well for earnings. Even if the prices remain firm, augur very well for earnings, and maybe there is more in store for the metal companies. Let's wait and watch. Stocks to watch. There are 3 or 4, a couple of them pharma names. So I'll start off with Biocon first. It may not be the one which will react the most, but it's got a deal which is higher than the previous valuations. So ADQ will invest about 555 crores for 1.8% minority stake in Biocon Biologics. This investment values Biocon Biologics at a post-money valuation of $4.17 billion. Remember, back in June or July, Tata Capital's investment had valued Biocon Biologics at 3.5 billion. And then they had subsequently a Goldman Sachs investment, which had valued Biocon Biologics at 3.9 billion, if I'm not wrong. So this now values at 4.17 billion. So there is an uptick in the valuation. My only point is, last time when the Goldman Sachs valuations happened, it didn't really move the needle on Biocon. So as much as a lot of people might believe that this will really move the needle, I don't quite know if it will. But if it does, then you know why. This is the reason. Bharat Rasayan is the other one. It is going to consider a buyback of equity shares proposal. So do watch out for Bharat Rasayan in the session today. It could be an interesting stock to monitor. It's a small cap name, but could be interesting. A couple of other names that I do want to read out. One of them is Strides, and Strides could be an interesting one today, simply because of the development that has happened. Aditya Puri, nonetheless, has joined as an advisor to the Strides Group and director of Stelis Biopharma. Stelis is a subsidiary of or associate company of Strides Group, and therefore you got to watch out for this. Could be a very interesting one. By the way, so Strides remains the big draw in the session. By the way, Nomura has come out with a report on Lupin with a target price of 1100. So that's the other one that you got to watch out for. And CLS has downgraded Aurobindo to an underperform. So those are a couple of interesting names in the pharma pack to watch out for. And then there are a few names which on price and volume activity were very, very interesting. So I'll just quickly bring them up today and just show you which ones to watch out for based on yesterday's price action, right? I mean, it's important to keep stock of that. So Finolex Cable is 9% uptake. NSA delivery percentage is 45%. That's a really strong buying delivery. Jamna Auto in a conference spoke some very strong commentary about Leaf Springs, the product that they're market leaders in. Good noticeable delivery percentages should be watched out for. Both the IDFC twins should be watched out for. And Dixon has been such a stock. 8% yesterday, over 15,000 rupees now. 40% NSE delivery percentage. So that's the other one that I would watch out for. So these are a few names that people should keep an eye out for. Last but not the least, the big thing that happened, and it happened right at the top. We have a new world richest man, and they have changed a little bit. I haven't checked the very latest data, but sometime yesterday, for all of you who don't know, Elon Musk eclipsed Jeff Bezos as the world's richest man because of the Tesla uptick that happened and the share price upticks that happened. Elon Musk toppled Jeff Bezos. So, well, the founder of Tesla is now richer than or at least was until yesterday, richer than the founder of Amazon. So that's the big thing that happened as well. So that kind of stood out for me. But from a trade setup perspective, yep, do watch out for metals. Do watch out for Bank Nifty in particular, and some of the pharma names, because all of them are in news, or some of them are in news because of brokerage notes, or because of the action of Aditya Puri joining Strides, or because of Biocon and the valuation that the Biocon Biologics deal has happened. So those are a few names that I would certainly be watching out for. Thanks so much for tuning into the trade setup today. Have a profitable day ahead.